Okay, I'm going to have a go in my sketchbook at considering this composition and colours and just really my thought processes before I tackle it as a main painting. I'm actually going to be using pretty much watercolours, maybe a little bit of Payne's grey acrylic ink, but I just want to practice it. This is one of the main reasons I use my sketchbook. Well, it's not one of the main reasons. I use it to experiment and explore, and that's basically the main reason, to see what happens and see what works. Now, one thing I absolutely hate with using in watercolours is masking fluid. So I prefer to use, this is a tiny piece of a broken off candle. So I'm going to use that because I want to preserve some of the white paper. And I'm just going to, as I say, this is all exploratory, so I'm going to see how that works. I'm just going to put a few blobs here and there. Unfortunately, you cannot see where you've put it until you put the paint on. So if you feel you're putting too much on, you've put too much on. So step away. So that's me putting that down. So that's the first thing. I've mixed up the colours here. So I've got a mixture in this one of tiny wee bit of cobalt turquoise light and some ultramarine and a little bit of burnt sienna, but it comes out as a sort of soft bluey grey, which is just glorious. And in this one I've got, this is ultramarine and burnt sienna with a little bit of the cobalt turquoise, which comes out as more as a grey bluey kind of offbeat colour, and then the Payne's grey has kind of bled into it, the acrylic ink. So those are the colours I'm going with. And let's say this is all about experimenting and exploring, and I've got some really technical bits of kit to do my trees and bits and pieces. This isn't going to say be a finished piece, it's about exploring, and I'm particularly interested in using those wacky little bits at the end of this tiny wee bit of bamboo stick and see where the feather takes us. But that's my thought process for the moment. So without further ado, let's get cracking. I'm just going to get my palette knife at the ready, so I might use that. So you've seen I put a little bit of candle wax on there to act as resist. I'm going to put a couple of bold marks down here, maybe picking up a little bit more of the ultramarine at this point. Further down the painting, I want it to be a little bit cooler. That's better. Maybe put a bit in there. So you're always assessing as you're going along and just thinking about the whole process and what works and what doesn't, and whether it's going to be okay in this piece. So I'm going to go in a bit there. Now I haven't drawn anything, but that was intentional because I want it all to be nice and loose. Now this paper is my sketchbook. It is a cartridge paper, so it's going to be a little bit less forgiving than if I was working on watercolour paper. But again, that's all by design. I don't want it to be too neat. I'm just getting a bit of a feel for the way those colours are working. I'm going to pop a bit there. Okay, now whilst that's all settling, to move that around, oh, you can start to see where the wax resist is working, which is very clever stuff. I'm just giving because I've got three colours into my very dark colour, I'm just giving it a bit of a stir. And what I want to do really early on is pop a drop in there, and maybe the tiniest little bit over here for the moment, just to see how that works. Yeah, so as I say, this is all the thinking stage at the moment, which is great. And whilst we've got this rather lovely wet surface, let's go in here. This is just dropping it in. This is a very dark base to this painting. I could imagine in the main piece, should I go forward with it, I would spatter down this area to get some really random marks. Every time I go back into my palette, I'm stirring it. I'm holding the wrong one. If I show you this, yeah, I keep giving it a stir because I say the pigments will all separate, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to drop some of that in now. Really dark. Give it a stir, drop it in, and I've got here, nice little blob there, doesn't matter, it is a sketchbook practice, but it's interesting how you want it to look all right. You still want it to be okay. I'm loving the way the paints are splitting. The glorious things about watercolour paper, painting even. I'll get there in a minute. Right, so there's the wax resist again, and just allow that to meander down here. There's some trees which will go in a minute, but I want to get those suggested trees going down there, even over the wax resist. Loving that bit. I'm going to tip the pad in a moment just to get some of those ideas. Now I'm going in with a palette knife, and the reason for that is I want some more, okay, I'll fill that in. I want some random marks, you know, here, there and everywhere, rather than it to be neat and tidy. And here you can borrow pigment, add a little bit more, just borrow a little bit of pigment. So I'm thinking about the reflections already in the water. Okay, now that's just a wee bit too much. I'm going to dab that out. And even more. Let's get over there. Yeah, that's more like it. That's where I wanted it to be rather than over there. Okay, and so this, I'd really rather like what's happening, so maybe I will take this into a full painting, and if I do, I will record that and share that all with you so you can see the entire process. There's a bit of light. I've got sellotape around the edge to give a neat edge, but there's a little bit of light there that I'm going to really resist the temptation to fill in, because one of the things I love in a sketchbook or a sketch that I do on plein air is that I seem to save fabulous white areas, and yet when I come back to do a painting, you know, a bigger piece in the studio in controlled conditions, and I tend to get rid of those white areas. Mad, isn't it? So I'm going to try and really stay away. Love this effect. Really, really nice. Okay, it's far too wet, so I can't do a lot more at the moment, but maybe I can go back in there. I might have to cease the filming and dry it. In fact, I will do that because I think it's better to see it from the next stage on. Right, see you in a moment. Okay, so the painting's now dry, or the sketch is now dry. So I'm going to go back in, stirring some more of that big puddle of dark. Make sure it's all mixed up, and I want to just drop rather a lot in here. I want to keep some of those light areas. Mind you, some of them are the wax resist, so they should stay, or maybe not. Look, there they are gone. So going across a little bit here. Now that's wax resist there, and I would like a very light sort of bank in the background. I'm going to move the pigment around in a moment so it's not so obvious, but yeah, let's say it is all just trial and error. I want to get that really quite dark and puddly here, so I can move that all around. But I think I'm going to have to go in with some of the acrylic because it won't go dark enough. Obviously watercolour dries quite a lot lighter, so I'm popping in with the pipette from the lid some of the Payne's grey. Get that in to go, it goes really dark. Actually this little one's getting quite empty, so in goes the palette knife. Go in that way. That way and I can get some really stronger marks going in. I have to bear in mind that this is just a sketch and it's all experimental, and we want to see how things work out. Just going to soften these edges now, so it is just all a suggestion that there's something in the distance, you know, some distant trees. Give it a bit of a helping hand with a damp brush, always helps. Okay, trying not to be too fiddly. As I say, it is just a sketch. All right, so in order to make things really much looser, I'm going to go in with these implements and just see if I can borrow pigment. If I can't borrow it, which it seems like, then add. It's obviously not quite wet enough in order for me to pick it up, so oopsie, that one's the one I want. Tip the pad a little and move those marks around. Oh, that's rather effective, isn't it? These are all like trees that are going through the horizon. I'm not worried about going over the top of the up by the past the sellotape, because the sellotape's there to protect it, so that's cool. Moving those marks down a little bit. So there we go. Don't bother buying any expensive brushes, just get yourself a bit of bamboo. Works a treat. And why not indeed. Right, now some coming down here. So I'm just going to slow it down just a little bit. Now this is great fun. Do you know, I can't recommend using a sketchbook enough, because you have such a relaxed attitude about what you're doing and the whole process. And it's really interesting to know how we kind of tighten up as soon as we feel we're doing something, you know, supposedly the real thing. Yeah. This is, the more you do this sort of process, the more you'll find that your own, you know, your work does loosen up. So it comes with massive recommendation. I'm trying to bring a line down here, trying to make sure I've got different directional marks. It's easy to do the same ones all the time. Even something coming in across here will be more interesting and help the whole composition. And now's the time to trial that, to see if that's going to work. Okay, right, and what I want to do is just do some, there's sort of like a little bank as such here, and I was going to flick, but you know, this tiny bit of bamboo stick is doing the job brilliantly, so I don't think I need anything else. And getting the light against the dark here, and I'm really enjoying myself, so probably now's the time to stop. Yeah, I think that's possibly it. Feather didn't get used. Could I use it for anything? Just for the heck of it, go on. Oh, it does work, yeah, that's nice. Softer marks, actually. Oh. Don't overdo it. There you go. So, I'm actually washing my feather. So used to washing things off. Okay, and I'll probably wash my bamboo off so that it can be used again. Right, that's all I really wanted to do. So I'm going to take the sellotape off. Yes, it's still damp. If I can get this off here without ripping the paper. I did touch the sellotape onto my clothes, you know, to try and take off some of the stickiness so that it wouldn't rip the paper if I could help it. Sometimes that works quite well. But what I really like about using sellotape rather than masking tape is that it is pulling some of the paper, but I say sketchbook, doesn't matter, is that it keeps a cleaner edge, which is just so nice to see. Should be pulling that away from, yep, see, there we are, it's ripping the paper, it doesn't matter, it's all fine. Away from the painting, that's it, there we go. So it gives a really clean line and hopefully not a hole in the paper. Well, there you go. So that was quite an interesting exercise. So will I actually paint that again? Probably, actually. In fact, I want to see, now I'm getting into being fiddly. Just bring a bit of that across. Now I've taken the sellotape off, which is a bit daft. Just have a few more lines. There we are. That's it though. Right, well, I hope you've enjoyed that and as much as I did, and I'll take a photograph when it's dry and show you that as well. Okay, thank you for staying and watching. Bye bye.